Hey everybody, just want to say thank you for coming back to the channel. I'm Andrew Cavanaugh as always, and welcome back to At the Movies with Andrew. In the week today I'm going to be talking about Dr. Sleep, and this is the long-awaited sequel to The Shining. Again, 39 years in the making. Very, very excited to talk to you about that today. It stars Ewan McGregor and Rebecca Ferguson amongst many others. Again, this is an interesting film. This is a movie that has to work as a sequel to The Shining, but also has to work as an adaptation of a book that was a sequel to a book. So it's not only an adaptation of a sequel book, but it also is an adaptation of a sequel to a movie. So I have to give a lot of credit to the writers that, you know, they included things from the movie as this adaptation of the sequel, but also they included elements of the novel. And you know, it must have been really tough to get Stephen King's approval, but supposedly he does approve of this movie, and I can't say I blame him. It is a phenomenal movie. I was very impressed with how well done this movie was. Really, you know, this movie has a lot more fantasy elements than the original film does, and I think that's one big thing that the movie-going audience needs to keep in mind when they go see this film, is that there are going to be moments where you really have to suspend disbelief. There are way more fantastical and paranormal elements in this movie than what we got in the original Shining, even though there are ghosts and, you know, psychic powers in the original Shining. It really did feel like a very grounded film, where this has much more fantastical elements to it. And, you know, there are some pretty abstract things that the audience really has to accept in order to take the movie seriously at all. And if those elements are not accepted, then I can say this movie's going to be a tough sit for people. So this is a much more traditional, fantastical Stephen King adaptation than it is a grounded, realistic film. And, you know, it also has some pretty good performances in it. I mean, first and foremost, Ewan McGregor as Danny Torrance, and the way his character is developed and everything, he was excellent in this movie, and I've always loved Ewan McGregor. He is just a really fantastic actor all around. I very rarely see him in a movie where he doesn't give a good performance. And, you know, him as Danny in this, you really get a handle on his character, where he was coming from after the events of The Shining, and really kind of what he's gone through. And I love how they show how he uses his gifts, how he uses his powers in this film. You know, Rebecca Ferguson as well plays a great villain, a villain named Rose the Hat. And again, very abstract type of character, but it is interesting to see what her intentions are, because what she wants to do and how she goes about achieving these things, it's really brutal and it's very nasty, and that kind of leads me into the plot of this film. Now, I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but basically the film follows Danny Torrance after the events of The Shining. You know, has some interesting moments where they show some things that happened after the events of the first movie. It's interesting to see. Some familiar faces showed up, and I'm glad to see that they, you know, really did keep the most of the DNA of the original film in this one. And it really just follows Danny as he's grown up and he uses his powers to do certain things. And then he comes upon more people that have these powers, and some really nefarious people who go after people with psychic powers as well. It's very interesting to see how they work everything together, and again, I won't spoil that for you here. But I have to say, the big standout in this film is the use of horror in this film. And really, the use of horror in this film is an interesting one, because this is not the traditional horror film that we have been given over the last couple years. This is not an extreme jump scare movie. This is not a movie where you're going to jump out of your seat every 2 minutes. It's not that kind of movie. This is a very pure horror film because it deals with horrific things. It deals with a whole lot of child endangerment, which was also a subject of the original film, violence towards a child, which is very, very deplorable, and this movie has a lot of it. And again, I'm not spoiling anything by telling you this. It really does deal a lot with that. And I think that's a tough thing. It's a tough thing, and nobody likes that. Let's be honest. Nobody likes aggression towards children. It's just not a happy topic. So that is a big thing. There's also a whole lot of suspense in this film, because a lot of the movie, I kind of had a feeling of where it was going in terms of plot, but from one turn to the next, I had no idea what was going to happen one turn to the next. I kind of figured that the big finale was going to have a particular setting, but other than that, I was just wondering where the hell this movie was going to go. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the fact that this movie has quite possibly some of the best direction I have seen in quite a while, especially when it comes to a horror film. Mike Flanagan directed and edited this movie, and among other things. And I have to say, his direction in this film is one of the standouts of the year. This is a spectacularly directed movie. Everything seems to be extremely orchestrated, and it is heavily inspired by Kubrick. I mean, the whole damn movie almost seems like it's a movie that Kubrick directed but never put out. It really is that dead on. The style, the camera movements, even the fade in and fade outs of the editing of the film is very, very reminiscent of Kubrick. The Shining score is used pretty much throughout. It's even sound effects and stuff from the original film are really used throughout. And I mean, it's very inspired. It's great work, and Flanagan has done some very good horror movies over the last couple years. My favorite thing that he's done is that Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. I have watched that twice, the entirety of that series twice. Watched it once, it scared the hell out of me, and I watched it again, and I watched it with a very keen eye. And this guy has an eye for detail that is absolutely stunning. There is an entire setup early on in the movie that is almost shot for shot reminiscent of a shot in the Shining. And it's not even a scary scene. It's just Ewan McGregor and Bruce Greenwood in an office. And I'll tell you, people in the audience caught on to it because it's so dead on. I was very, very impressed with his direction in the editing. It was fantastic. The only thing that I have to say is a negative about this movie is that as much as I love the character of Danny Torrance and the villains and Abra, one of the younger characters in the film, again, great performances by all, great direction. The only thing is that I had a very hard time getting attached to these characters. It was very difficult for me. And I'm going to be honest, I was not really heavily moved by the film. I mean, there was a couple scenes in particular that got me, but I was never, like, really invested in any of these characters. It didn't really hit home for me for some reason. Maybe upon multiple rewatchings, I would, maybe have a different feeling, but I just never got very much attached to the characters in the film. And that, again, could be the plot, it could be the story. Honestly, it seems like the movie keeps these characters at an arm's length, and, you never really get quite deeply in touch with anyone except for really Danny. And even his character is not really extremely fleshed out to the point where I cared about him on a human level. But again, that's just my opinion. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. It's a fantastic sequel to The Shining. Again, my only real gripe is the character development is nice, but it really didn't get me deeply involved in the film. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. I thought it was a very well done film and a spectacular sequel to The Shining. Anytime a movie that can come out damn near 40 years later can almost compete with the original is impressive. And I really like this movie, and I highly recommend you go out and see it. It's just very, very entertaining, and again, a horror movie in the classic sense. So, thank you very much for coming back to At the Movies with Andrew. As always, I'm Andrew Cavanaugh. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel so I can continue to bring you reviews and videos like this. Thank you so much. So long.